È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Dal 2004 la prima università digitale italiana. 21 corsi di laurea, oltre 50 master e più di 100 corsi di formazione. Unimarconi.it.
Vi prego, vi imploro, con umiltà e con fiducia, permettete a Cristo di parlare all'uomo.
Don Gius aveva capito il problema che avevo. Se la tua vocazione è vero, il tuo lavoro verrà fuori anche dai sassi.
Di comunicare la fede agli altri, ma veramente insieme a loro riscoprire che cos'è la fede, che cos'è la fede per me. Portare Cristo agli altri, comunicarlo agli altri è l'unico modo che abbiamo per conoscerlo veramente.
L'iter communionis aiuta a comunicare all'esterno la ricchezza di vita, di giudizi, di tentativi, di opere che nascono dalle persone e dalle comunità. L'Intercomunionis è proprio la vita del movimento. Scrivete all'Intercomunionis le vostre esperienze, ci fate bene. Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Dal 2004 la prima università digitale italiana. 21 corsi di laurea, oltre 50 master e più di 100 corsi di formazione. unimarconi.it.
Vi prego, vi imploro, con umiltà e con fiducia, permettete a Cristo di parlare all'uomo.
Don Gius aveva capito il problema che avevo. Se la tua vocazione è vero, il tuo lavoro verrà fuori anche dai sassi.
Di comunicare la fede agli altri, ma veramente insieme a loro riscoprire che cos'è la fede, che cos'è la fede per me. Portare Cristo agli altri, comunicarlo agli altri è l'unico modo che abbiamo per conoscerlo veramente.
L'iter communionis aiuta a comunicare all'esterno la ricchezza di vita, di giudizi, di tentativi, di opere che nascono dalle persone e dalle comunità. L'iter communionis è proprio la vita del movimento. Scrivete all'iter communionis le vostre esperienze, ci fate bene. Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
From my heart, I welcome each one of you to this 45th edition of the meeting for the Friendship Among Peoples. Never in the story of mankind have we had social, cultural, technological change and political changes that have been so pervasive, so interconnected, and above all so accelerated as the changes that we're going through in this historical moment. But how can we face these changes without the risk of missing the opportunities that they bring, without yielding naively to their attractive but ambiguous aspects, without fleeing into indifference or resignation? The possibility to live our own humanity in these conditions of unknowns. And how is it possible to construct peace amidst the wars that are so atrocious and difficult? These are the questions that have brought us to choose as the title of this meeting, The Provocation of the American author Cormac McCarthy. If we are not seeking what's essential, if we're not after the essence, then what are we after? The shows, the exhibitions, the discussions of these meetings are an invitation to discover and rediscover what's essential. What permits us today to be free, responsible, full of solidarity, and irreducible in front of any power or potentate. To introduce us into this adventure, for ourselves and for the world in this week, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, wanted to send us a message of support and closeness. This is brought to us by the Bishop of Rimini, Monsignor Niccolo Anselmi, who we thank for his presence and the friendship with which he accompanies us. Message of I thank Most Excellent Reverend, on the occasion of the 40th meeting for the Friendship Among Peoples, the Holy Father wishes to send a message of good wishes to the participants, greeting the organizers, the volunteers, and all those who will take part in the event, whose title represents a heartfelt appeal to responsibility. If we are not after the essence, then what are we after? Especially as we are going through complex times, the search for what constitutes the heart of the mystery of life and reality is of crucial importance. Indeed, our age is marked by various problems and considerable challenges, in the face of which we sometimes find a sense of impotence, a renunciation and passive attitude that can lead to dragging one's feet and allowing oneself be swept away by the days of the ephemeral to the point of losing the meaning of existence. In this scenario, so the choice to set out on the trail of what is essential is all the more pertinent. Pope Francis, therefore, encourages the attempt to seek with passion and enthusiasm for what brings out the beauty of life, confronting the question posed by Don Luigi Giussani when he courageously stated, "The heart is worn by hardening, or rather the loss of passion and the taste for living. To be old at 20 and even earlier, to be old at 15 years of age, this is the characteristic feature of the world of today." As the icy winds of war blow, joining with the recurrent phenomena of injustice, violence and inequality, as well as the grave climate crisis and unprecedented anthropological change, It is essential to stop and ask ourselves, is there something worth living and hoping for? Ever since the beginning of his pontificate, Pope Francis has urged us to read even the resistance, hardships, and failings of today's men and women as a call to reflection, so that the heart may open to the encounter with God, and each person may become aware of himself, his neighbor, and reality. His constant invitation is to become beggars of the essential, of what gives meaning to our life. First of all, by divesting ourselves of what weighs down our daily life, following the example of a climber who on the rock face must rid himself of excess in order to be able to climb more rapidly. By doing so, we discover that the value of human existence does not consist in things, in successes achieved, in the race of competition, but first and foremost in that relationship of love that sustains us, rooting our journey in trust and in hope. It is the friendship with God, which is then reflected in all other human relations. That is the foundation of the joy that will never fail. We are beloved. This is the essential truth that Don Giussani himself announced to young university students. You are loved. This is the message that arrives in your life. This is Jesus Christ in the history of humankind, the continuous beginning of this message. You are loved. What is life? Being loved. And our being? Being loved. And destiny? Being loved. On the same wavelength, Pope Francis recalls that what is essential, most beautiful, most attractive, and at the same time most necessary for us is faith in Jesus Christ. Indeed, only the Lord saves our fragile humanity, and in the midst of adversity, lets us experience an otherwise impossible joy. Without this anchorage point, the boat that is our life would be at the mercy of waves and at the risk of sinking. Returning to the essential that is Jesus does not mean escaping from reality, but on the contrary, it is the condition to truly immerse oneself in history, to face it without fleeing its challenges, to feel the courage to risk to love, and even when it doesn't seem worth the effort, to live in the world without any fear. As the then Archbishop Montini wrote, you are necessary to us, O Christ, O Lord, O God with us, to learn true love and to walk in the joy and strength of your charity along the path of our arduous life. In this spirit, then, the Holy Father appreciates and shares the aims of the forthcoming meeting, because focusing on the essential helps us to take our life into our own hands and to make it an instrument of love, mercy, and compassion, becoming a sign of blessing for our neighbor. Faced with the temptation of discouragement, the complexity of the current crisis, and in particular, the challenge of peace that's seemingly impossible, the Holy Father urges everyone to become responsible agents of change, actively collaborating in the Church's mission to give life together to places where Christ's presence can be seen and touched. This joint commitment can give rise to a new world where the love that was manifested to us in Christ may finally triumph, and the entire planet may become a temple of fraternity. Pope Francis hopes that the rich program of the meeting, in its multiple proposals and languages, may inspire in many the desire to be seekers of the essential and to make the passion for the proclamation of the gospel the source of liberation from all slavery and force that heals and transforms humanity. Make it flourish in hearts. To all organizations, volunteers and participants, he heartily sends his blessing, asking you to please pray for him. In adding my personal good wishes as well, I avail myself of the circumstance to confirm my distinguished reverence to your most reverend excellency, Pietro Cardinal Parolin, Secretary of State of His Holiness. Okay, I'll stop. We thank the Holy Father for these words, this encouragement and comfort. I'll now will read the message of the President of the Republic, Sergio Mattarella, who wanted to make himself a participant with us in this meeting.
The meeting, now in its 45th edition this year, again offers its contribution of culture, dialogue and humanity. It's an event which has been able to question itself on the founding reasons of our society, and that continues to renew itself, involving the old and the young alike, trying to grasp beyond the contingencies and to try and understand what moves things deeper. I extend my warmest greetings to everyone who is taking part, in the certainty that these days here in Rimini will be a valuable enrichment for everyone. And also I extend my greetings to the organisers and the volunteers, and I like to express my appreciation for their commitment. The theme of this edition expresses the meeting's cultural roots, proposing an open look at the extraordinary transformations we are experiencing. We want to search for the essential, just as the global flows of information are becoming almost rivers in flood, bursting their banks, while technology and science is showing us solutions that were, until yesterday, totally unimaginable, while the opportunities evolve to individual people, repropose the kind of fallacious flattery of man's omnipotence, this false idea. And yet, in the face of so many new opportunities for humanity, we touch once again upon horror, atrocities, the escalation of wars, the will to dominate, with a dramatic return to the past. Feelings of fear, of mistrust, sometimes of indifference, not infrequently feelings of resentment and hatred too, are now resurfacing. This is why it is essential to put the person, the human, back at the center of the story. The desire for life, for fullness in the relationship within our communities. Because the essential does not lie separately in a self-sufficient way, in a self-sufficient I or sense of self, but in the encounter with others, in the discovery of truths which others bear, and thus in walking together. To think when we think about tomorrow and what we can build in the future. The educational and cultural commitment to which the meeting bears witness is of great, great value. Sergio Mattarella.
È un messaggio di profonda stima e di fiducia.
It's a message of great faith, and we thank Mattarella for his support. We are profoundly grateful to be able to open this meeting with a person who day after day, in a dramatic way, meets the challenge, rises to the challenge of the essential. In a situation where the present is full of pain and the future is empty of hopeful prospects. A world where faith asks to be taken up again and again in an ever more radical way, and where hope proves itself to be a truly heroic virtue. With you, I greet and I thank the Patriarch of Jerusalem, His Beatitude Cardinal Pierbattista Pizzaballa. Thank you for coming, Your Eminence. We are well aware of the situation, and that we know it's not easy. Even just your journey here was rather difficult. Your Eminence, first of all, I'd like to begin this discussion starting from your vocation. Exactly 40 years ago, you entered the Franciscan order. While reflecting on the title in this meeting, we referred to St. Francis often, because he was, one of the most essential saints in the way he lived his life. And because of that, we were able to value in a rather surprising way all of creation, as he would express it, and all the details he liked to speak of. And no one lived brotherhood like he did, with such dedication, even to the point of meeting a sultan in the middle of the Crusades. So what does being a Franciscan mean to you today? I'll try to be brief. First of all, every Christian vocation is centered on the person of Jesus Christ. Everything revolves around that experience that he builds and that is essential. It's the foundation. From then, to be Franciscan is to experience and to live an experience with Christ, living in the way, in a model that St. Francis passed down and founded. What was truly formative of about the identity of St. Francis was the incarnation, the humanity of Jesus. That is to say, it's an experience where it became real, it became concrete. And it redeemed his whole gaze on humanity, on the world, on creation. So even when I was a boy, beginning here in Rimini, when I was just a young boy, I was attracted by the concreteness with which St. Francis lived his vocation and lived his encounter with Christ. We often think about Jesus as a sort of an abstract reality, but that's not the case. There's nothing more real, nothing more concrete than the encounter with Christ. So, you can see from how I'm dressed now that in a different reality, let's say. When I was with the brothers, it was a lot more natural. We can say the external, visible aspect does sort of alter things, but now I need to bring this experience of the incarnation, of the humanity of Christ, the encounter with Christ, into the reality that I live now, which is the leader of the churches in Jerusalem, which has always had a very difficult, a very kind of exceptional circumstance. So for me now to be a Franciscan personally means to ask myself constantly, what is Christ asking me to do right now? It needs to become the primary criteria for judging situations of pain, of regret, of struggle in all senses. To live in such a way that everything I do passes through this experience, that this experience remains at the foundation of my life and of everything I do. On a personal level, I'd like to pass on my experience to the community, to the whole kind of church community. in such a polarized world, I think we need to be able to say, stop, let's start again, let's start from Christ and make all our judgments, our choices, our decisions, every word should be compatible with that experience, with that relationship, with that friendship. This is what being Franciscan means to me. You're in 1990, your order sent you to the Studium Biblicum Franciscanum Institute in Jerusalem, where you were first involved in the study of Holy Scriptures, but also in dialogue with other religions, with Jews and with Muslims. For you, this interreligious dialogue you lived, not only in a theological and academic relationship, but person to person, what impact did it have on you? So I think I said it here in the meeting a few years ago, but it was an important step, personally speaking, for me. I come from a kind of region of Italy in the middle of nowhere, and in there you used to be so traditional. It was so traditional. People would be Catholic before they were even born, and the Pope was kind of seen as the Pope and the Emperor were the most important things, and that's kind of what it was like in where I lived. From then, I went to a seminary here in Rimini when I was 11. To the brothers, to the monks. Now I'll give you the short version of my story. And I grew up in a kind of hyper-Catholic context, I'd describe it, where catechesis, teaching was all Catholic, and so it was all kind of within a Catholic framework. So then when I went to Jerusalem, there the first kind of impact, what first struck me was I realized that the vast majority of people not only are not Catholic, but they're not even Christian. Then I was sent by my superiors at the time to study in a Hebrew school. Well, I was the only Christian in my class. They were all obviously Jews. They were studying their scriptures. And so they were, religious Orthodox Jews studying their own texts. And I was a Christian, so obviously the first questions were there. So you're a Christian, what does it mean to be a Christian? Who was Jesus? We began to read out of friendship, we used to read the Gospel together. And this was an important step for me. This was a real interreligious dialogue for me. I was Catholic before I was even born. I knew everything, Jesus' life, death, miracles. I knew how to answer to all the questions. I knew all the catechism. I became aware that as far as I couldn't answer their questions about Jesus, at least, I could answer, but they didn't understand. My answers were sort of built for those who were already Catholic, and for those who weren't Catholic or weren't even Christian, it was very difficult to understand. I'll give an example. I'll always remember this one moment. It was quite an important occasion for me, and it kind of refounded my own faith and my own vocation, reaffirmed it. With a Jewish friend of mine who's married to a rabbi, I'm still in touch with her every now and again. She says, "Look, I need to work in the evenings. I can't come every evening, every week to read the Gospels together. So I've got to interrupt. But I've got a question to ask you. Now that we've kind of broken the ice between us, Jesus is fascinating. The Gospel's fascinating," she asked me. "I find nothing problematic bar one thing that you need to explain to me: the resurrection. Even without the resurrection, Jesus is a fascinating person. The Gospel is a very important book. Why do you need to make him resurrect?" She'd understood everything. And she didn't understand my answer. She went into a crisis, and I'd understood by looking at her that she hadn't understood. And it was an important thing for me. I wasn't able to explain to her sufficiently the answer to her question. But this woman, the Jew who doesn't believe in Christ, she gave back to me. She brought back a part of my faith that I'd not kind of fully had to interact with, fully understood, and that's the resurrection. And you can't understand the resurrection. You have to encounter it. In the Gospels, you don't find a description of the resurrection, but an encounter with the resurrected one. So for me, this is interreligious dialogue. The encounter between people who have an experience of faith, even one that's different from ours, but that once shared helps us to illuminate in a more complete sense, helps you understand who you are as well as understanding others better. And this is an experience that we are very much in need of.
Grazie.
We'll come back to this dialogue, it's interreligious dialogue, starting from a question on the current situation. So you've lived for almost 35 years in the Holy Land, a large part of my life by now, yeah. And maybe like few others, you know the conflicts, the wars, even in the depths of them. But after the war of the 7th of October, you said that we're dealing with a tragedy that's unprecedented, and you weren't referring only to the armed conflict. So what did you mean when you said unprecedented? So even the armed aspect of it being so long was unprecedented, but I want to go on. I don't want to go on about the military part because you can all see this, what's going on. Even if we are in a moment that's decisive with the dialogues, if they really are dialogues that are going on, it wants to say that the impact that this war has had on both the peoples, the Israeli and Palestinian people, is without precedent. For Israel, what happened, and the interpretations are different, but I wouldn't go into that. But for Israel, what happened on the 7th of October was an incredible shock. Israel was born as the place where the Jews were at home and were safe. And so the 7th of October made them show they weren't safe, made them feel that. So naturally for the Palestinians, and even for the whole world, what happened in Gaza is something we've not seen before. So this enormous impact that brought to an exasperated way, brought things to a crisis point, sentiments that are already there. In the common language, hate, bitterness, vendetta, justice as revenge, as vendetta, profound mistrust, the incapacity to recognize the existence of the other. So in the book of Isaiah, chapter 7 or 8, I've gone back to that in these recent months. Isaiah talks against Babylon, the Babylon of that time, Babylon that said, and the way he accused it because it says, I and no other person. Me and no other. They didn't want God in front of them. I have the impression that what we're saying now is me and no other. So not admitting the existence of another, the language of refusal one of the other has become the daily material that you breathe in the media, in the social media, etc. And it's something truly dramatic. The war will finish. Now, I hope that those negotiations that are going on will do something. I have some doubts, but maybe it's the last train out. If we don't manage to get to go ceasefire now, then it'll be really dramatic. And we're in a moment where you could go one way towards a ceasefire, we could go to another decision. And everything depends on the next few days. So I think it's really important to pray, and I've asked for this. It's the thing that we can do. And so in one way or another, the war will finish, but then to reconstruct that from that attitude of hate, of mistrust, to rebuild from that will be a huge fatigue, a huge effort, which we all need to commit to. So in this reconstruction, what role do the responsibles, the leaders of the various religions have? An important role. because the interreligious dialogue at the moment is in crisis. Even this is a watershed in interreligious dialogue. So Christians, Jews, Muslims can't publicly encounter each other. Even at the institutional level, we struggle to speak to each other. This is a great pain, even for me personally. So interreligious dialogue, and this generation, these decades have done, has constructed some beautiful things. On like the most recent meeting of Brotherhood in Abu Dhabi. But at the moment now, we can't meet each other. We can't speak to each other. So let's say that everything that's happened so far is important. We shouldn't ignore that. But now to restart a new phase of interreligious dialogue needs to be, if I can express my view, less of elites and more of communities. It needs to arrive down to the level of the community. And now the leaders, back to your question, the religious leaders have a great responsibility, not only of listening and thinking of, in my community, not only being the voice of a community, but helping your community to not close themselves in their own narrative on themselves, but to raise their eyes and look at the other, to get to know the other. So a rabbi from the 60s said that no religion is an island. Above all, today, nobody's an island. And we need to be in relationship with everyone. And this will have some consequences, some significant ones, to accept the other one for what they are, not to impose myself on the other, and so on. It's not simple. It's not to be taken for granted. It's necessary, though. In this one moment, I think that we are come back to being a bit isolated, a bit islands of us in ourselves. And so we need to raise our eyes and understand that we aren't an island. Before as the custodian of the Holy Land, and now as the Patriarch of Jerusalem, you've always been responsible for communities that belong. Sorry, it's convenient not to be responsible, but the question is that you had a very deeper, broader responsibility than others, because you needed to guide the communities where they find peoples who belong to very different peoples, Syrians, Palestinians, and many others. What does it mean to live in a Christian communion when people belong to politically different peoples that are so divided politically? It's true. In the first months of October, there were difficult moments for our diocese, which covers 4 different nations: Israel, Palestine, Cyprus, and Arab and also Hebrew Israel. We have people in Gaza under the Israeli bombs. We have Catholics, Christians who are doing the military service, so on completely different fronts. This, above all, is to say that an abstract Christianity doesn't exist. There's no such thing. Christianity is always incarnate. So we need to think about our own belonging. Israeli and Christian, Palestinian in everything. So unity is not simple, hasn't been simple. It's clear that you belong to your people, but there's also a belonging to Christ, that must help us to have a view that's different on everything. It's not always straightforward. And so right now in these months, I thought about a passage from the Gospel in Gethsemane. Jesus in Gethsemane, what did the disciples do? Some of them were asleep. Others ran away. Others took up the sword. And this is the temptations that we have. one could go to sleep. One could, I don't want to see. One could close their eyes to what's going on in a kind of sophisticated devotionism, to use an old expression, where we prayers, liturgy, sacraments, but not looking at what's happening around me, and that can't give a response. The other possibility is fleeing, running away, seeing what happens, but not wanting to deal with it. And the other one picks up the sword, so it goes to the struggle. Jesus and the fight in Gethsemane using the sword, and so the phase of political activism, we could say, of struggle, of fight. The response of Jesus instead was that of handing himself over. So that doesn't mean surrendering, but of giving life, giving our life. He gave his life. Giving your life means putting your life, entrusting your life to God, having trust. Father, if it's possible, may this cup pass from me, but if it's your will, I entrust myself to you. So this is what I'm trying to bring into our communities, that we don't have a response to these situations. But we have a clue, we have an address, and together, each one of us, from our particular perspective, with our pain, we can bring this question to He who gives sense to everything that we experience, that we live. The Christians are about 3% of the population in the Holy Land, even very reduced compared to earlier years. How is the Church perceived at the local level, and what possibilities are there to contribute to reconciliation? Well, let's say that, to be sincere, nobody is waiting for the community, the Christian community can do something to solve the problems. So politically, we are all more or less irrelevant, we could say. And maybe that will make somebody angry, but this is true. So the first thing is being there, remaining there, being present. It's not in a sense of requiring that we must have a role in the situation, but being capable of saying a word. Firstly, encouraging, sustaining our people who are there. So we need to be present. And very often what happens when there's a crisis, when the first question that people ask is, where were you? And the response is, I was there. Simple, the first thing. So sustaining people in a material way as well, to doing whatever's possible. Not only our own people, but also the others. And one of the motives for which, for example, our community in the little parish of Gaza, about 600 people remained, can manage to, if its dynamism is because they're not just looking at themselves waiting for the war to finish, but they're seeking to help with our support, naturally, to distribute help to people around them. And the other word that Pope Francis uses often is parousia. We can't resolve the problem, but we can give a word of truth that isn't a word of truth on just what's happening, that people can see it without being part of a conflict. I think this is the role that the Church can bring. You've spoken various times that there's no reconciliation without pardon, but at the same time, that pardon, forgiveness can't be imposed. But is it possible in some way to invite people to pardon, so above all in circumstances of objective injustice? How can I respond to that? It's not easy to answer these questions because they are questions that are not just abstractions. First, pardon, justice are important words that are difficult, that touch concretely the flesh and the life of people. And so you need to be careful when you're speaking of them because they're important words. The Christian faith cannot be separated from the idea of pardon. Christian faith is the encounter with Christ And that encounter is an encounter which saves you and which forgives you, pardons you. Encountering Christ, encountering God, the first experience is that you're a sinner. And that this experience, this awareness of being sinner is not a condemnation, it's an announcement of salvation. The sinner was redeemed. So now at the personal level, forgiveness and justice are almost synonyms. Jesus on the cross, he didn't wait for justice to happen, for pardoning, he pardoned. And that there are people in history who, even in front of the opportunity of being executed when they're innocent, they pardoned. These are terribly strong experiences, beautiful. And so at the personal level, justice and pardon can't be totally separated. They're almost synonyms, if they are illuminated by faith, naturally. At the level of communities, the dynamics are different, at the public community level, because the community is based on other words as well: dignity, equality. These are words that are constitutive of the life of a community, and so forgiving without that there be dignity, that there being equality, it isn't a gesture that brings dignity and equality. It means justifying some evil that's being done. So pardon has, which there must be present different dynamics that require time, that require a process of healing. But first of all, of welcoming, of accepting the evil, of recognizing it, and there also needs a word of truth in what's happening, because if you don't do truth, you don't say things with clarity. What are you pardoning? And so this must be done at the level of communities through very different dynamics. Like in South Africa, after apartheid, there was the commission that had to spend years to recover and recognize, understand, give value to healing what the things that were done. And so it's not simple. And as a pastor, I find myself always in this difficult situation, forgiving for a Palestinian. Pardoning now means justifying what's been going on. But as a pastor, I can't say, look, nevertheless, it's true that you must do justice, but remember that justice without pardon becomes simply recrimination. When the aim isn't that of becoming a vendetta, revenge. It's not closing yourself and boxing up a reality, but valuing the situation. This can only be done through pardon. In the Christian community, Christian faith must bring this contribution within the debate, public debate, this possibility. Maybe in this moment it can't be done. Let's be clear. You need to work at the personal level with groups, etc. But you need to wait for the opportune moment to do it, because it's the only way to overcome this impasse. To deepen a bit this theme that's so difficult, so existentially difficult, I want to do another question. Much bitterness, much hate have very deep roots, almost irremovable roots. With respect to this, Pope Francis has called for a penitential memory, and you too have used the word purification of memory. What do you mean by this purification of memory? Very briefly. When I was a child, these things don't happen anymore, but when I was a child, we did an examination of conscience. You modern people maybe don't do this anymore, but I was a child. I didn't know what sin was, but the sisters said to me, "What does it mean? You need to say all the sins you've done." But it was a formation, an education to take awareness of your own in your own life, that not everything is clean and pure and beautiful in our and healthy in our life. And so, purifying memory, but it's above all taking awareness. Another thing, sorry. Today, I'm almost 60 years old. I have awareness that certain things that I did 20, 30 years ago, I shouldn't have done them. They were errors, but at the time I didn't realize this, and so purifying memory means having the awareness that we always need to reread ourselves, to reread our relationships, even with the new awareness we have, to be aware that I might have gone wrong. I might have done a reading of the past that maybe justified certain things that now are overcome. We've gone past. So purifying the memory doesn't mean cancelling everything. Doesn't mean renouncing everything or annulling yourself. But it means being aware, becoming aware that I need to reread myself continuously in the light of history and current awareness. So this can help in the relationships with the others, above all when they touch themes of your relationship with the others, like in the history, in our relationships with Judaism, for example, in the past. We today have become aware of how much ill we have done, how much evil we've done, which doesn't mean renouncing ourselves, cancelling ourselves, but taking aware of this helps me to read and reconstruct these relationships on a different model, not that of the past. And it's like this that we need daily to have continuously to look at the narratives of what's happening in the Holy Land now, closed in exclusive kind of stories of each other. We won't ever get out of this if we don't have a better gaze. Not even one next to each other, one against each other. And so we need to purify this memory. That doesn't mean cancelling our own history, but rereading it in a way that it can help me today to live in a better way with respect to the past. With respect to this purification of memory, we all have, maybe not many of us, the great majority have thought that there might be a purification, maybe at the lay secular level, of a phenomenon, the historical dramatic phenomenon like that of anti-Semitism. Instead, we are realizing that this is getting back to us. It's coming back. It's not only the criticism of the Israeli government, but really an anti-Semitism in many young people is coming back. How do you explain this phenomenon? It's a drama. Anti-Semitism is a drama. And one thing is criticizing the politics of governments, which could be legitimate. The other is saying you can't be a Jew. This is unacceptable and must be condemned. Like I was saying before, even here, there are exclusive narratives, pro-Palestine, pro-Israel. Which one excludes the other, and so on. So we need to, even here, the religious leaders have a responsibility to avoid, even if anti-Semitism has a more political than religious impact or aspect, is to not become tools of this and create a culture of relationships, of welcoming one in front of the other, where nobody is excluded. Anti-Semitism, with it looking at the way society is built, etc., you as a Jew, you as a Muslim, there's Islamophobia in other places, or whether in other places because you're a Christian, you don't have rights, you're excluded, so on. But a moment of great decay of society when this happens. Society creates itself with, not against. In many images that reach us from this war, above all in Gaza, there's something that every time we see it raises a question, which I'll ask if you have a response, which is the suffering of children. Because seeing children without water, without food, orphans, traumatized, this suffering of the innocents, is there a response to this? No. In these recent years, it seems, we've reduced faith to a kind of, there's a risk, rather, of risking the faith to a kind of panacea, a faith that resolves all the problems, a belonging to the church as a community that's perfect. And it's not like this. Even in Christian faith, there is an element of tragicity. Our questions are the questions of everybody, because why? The question is why? Because we know why. It's the evil of man that does these actions. There's no point asking that God is held for what we do. So there's the problem, the drama, the tragic element of the faith. And in the faith, we can only orient this question to God, remaining within this question, which nevertheless sustains you to do all that's possible that this doesn't happen, or that a gesture of love could be balanced as much as possible against the pain and the tragicness, the tragedy that we see in the pictures of Gaza and of many other places in the world. But the faith is not a response to all the questions. The faith is relationship within which all of the questions have a space. Thank you. Thank you. I want to leave your last words even as an invitation to our conversation, because between a sense of impotence and a sense of omnipotence, you have brought us to look at these conflicts that are so dramatic in a different light. So, not because there be a solution, but there's a hope against all hope that you have taught us today, and for this I thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks and goodbye. Thank you. Thank you so much.
civiltà dell'amore. Fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con Easy Bank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Dal 2004 la prima università digitale italiana. 21 corsi di laurea, oltre 50 master e più di 100 corsi di formazione. unimarconi.it.
Vi prego, vi imploro, con umiltà e con fiducia, permettete a Cristo di parlare all'uomo.
Don Gius aveva capito il problema che avevo. Se la tua vocazione è vero, il tuo lavoro verrà fuori anche dai sassi.
Di comunicare la fede agli altri, ma veramente insieme a loro riscoprire che cos'è la fede, che cos'è la fede per me. Portare Cristo agli altri, comunicarlo agli altri è l'unico modo che abbiamo per conoscerlo veramente.
L'iter communionis aiuta a comunicare all'esterno la ricchezza di vita, di giudizi, di tentativi, di opere che nascono dalle persone e dalle comunità. L'iter communionis è proprio la vita del movimento. Scrivete all'iter communionis le vostre esperienze, ci fate bene. Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo.
Dal 2004 la prima università digitale italiana. 21 corsi di laurea, oltre 50 master e più di 100 corsi di formazione. unimarconi.it.
Vi prego, vi imploro, con umiltà e con fiducia, permettete a Cristo di parlare all'uomo.
Don Gius aveva capito il problema che avevo. Se la tua vocazione è vero, il tuo lavoro verrà fuori anche dai sassi.
di comunicare la fede agli altri, ma veramente insieme a loro riscoprire che cos'è la fede, che cos'è la fede per me. Portare Cristo agli altri, comunicarlo agli altri è l'unico modo che abbiamo per conoscerlo veramente.
L'iter communionis aiuta a comunicare all'esterno la ricchezza di vita, di giudizi, di tentativi, di opere che nascono dalle persone e dalle comunità. L'iter communionis è proprio la vita del movimento. Scrivete all'iter communionis le vostre esperienze, ci fate bene. Si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi